So Donald Trump became the target of a second assassination attempt this week, the second in 2 months. And I'm reading the media left go, oh yeah, whatever, or even, his own fault. To me, it's amazing. USA Today, front page, the next day after the attempted assassination attempt, a tiny pointer up the top. Trump safe after shots fired. But the main story, hope in America. The Cincinnati Enquirer tweets, opinion, Donald Trump brings a lot of this stuff on himself. Stuff being the word for a crazed gunman trying to murder the President of the United States. And on our ABC's Q&A show, it was quite the show for stupidity, really. The same dumb assumption that somehow it's Trump's fault, or it's the fault of his running mate, J.D. Vance, or it's the right generally. All this hate is the fault of the right.
How can we combat the practice of clearly contested but highly contagious rhetoric that's being spread in the US by the likes of J.D. Vance from coming to Australia? And is there any evidence that this is linked to today's assassination attempt on the presidential candidate?
J.D. Vance is the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. It's not just a throwaway comment to say that immigrants are eating their people's pets.
But these things aren't created in Australia. They are created offshore. They are copies of often far-right propaganda in other jurisdictions.
The far right. A guy on the left nearly shot the president. You're talking about the far right. Meanwhile, the media is letting itself off the hook. I mean, does it really think it can pump out this Trump derangement and nobody at all will take them seriously and think, well, if the man really is like Hitler, shooting's too good for him? This is the real hate.
Donald Trump only cares about himself. This is a populist looking to serve his own interests and harm other people and dismantle our democracy and make it just about himself. This is a guy who's doing it on behalf of Putin.
The threat that Donald Trump is to this nation.
Cult of authoritarian personality in league with autocrats and kleptocrats and dictators all over the world.
I could run hours of that stuff. Joining me each week is a regular Bolt Report commentator, Sean Spicer, the first White House spokesman for President Donald Trump. Sean Spicer, great to see you again. Do you draw a link between the deranged anti-Trump rhetoric we've been hearing and these attempts to kill him?
I don't think it takes too much to intimate that some nut job on the left is going to hear the leaders of their party and their movement say, we need to, that there's a threat, and obviously that the instinct is then to get rid of that threat. And that's what we've seen now twice, is people who decide that they need to get rid of the threat that the left says they pose. And for all the talk, Andrew, about Donald Trump and the language he uses, he calls people's names. There's no question about it. None. But there's a big difference between the language of the left, which is that people are a threat to democracy, to the existential nature of our country. That requires and inspires people to take action.
I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, we still don't know what's going through this guy. He had a few screws loose, obviously, but you can't pump that out there and not expect someone to take it seriously. I'm struck by the refusal of the left to accept that almost every serious assassination attempt on one of your presidents or candidates in my lifetime has come from the left, Sean. You've had 2 attacks on Trump, this one by a Democrat donor and Trump hater. You had Ronald Reagan, shot by another. You had Robert Kennedy killed by a Palestinian activist. You had John F. Kennedy by a far-left ex-soldier. I mean, why the denial that when it comes to political violence, you've got to look left before you look right?
Well, because it's an inconvenient reality that you're pointing out. The left wants to talk about all of the issues that exist, but when it comes to their keeping their own house in order, they don't want to look there, right? It doesn't go with the narrative. Not just that, but they have a media that is complicit in this. And when these things happen, I remember I was at the White House when that softball incident occurred, where the Bernie Sanders supporter tried to mow down all those Republican congressmen on the baseball field. And it was Steve Scalise that ended up in the hospital. I went there with President Trump that night. And immediately the left put out calls to say, let's not look to make this political. Let's not blame anybody. They want to blame everyone every single day. They want to motivate their base and fire them up with this rhetoric. But then when they do something, they don't want anyone pointing back at them to be part of the solution or the excuse, because that's just the hypocrisy that they live in every single day. But it's this goes back to what we've talked about in the past with Kamala Harris in general. When you know that there's not going to be accountability, you can get away with it. And that's kind of what they do in so many circumstances in our culture and our society here in America right now.
You also had Time magazine in denial, Sean. I'm just looking at it here, where they said, it's this guy, this 58-year-old shooter, wannabe shooter, had an unclear political ideology. And yet when you have a look at the sticker on the back of his pickup, you've got a Biden-Harris election sticker there. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, there's two things in the press that are happening, right? So it's not just the sticker. You look at his political donations. All of his donations are to folks on the left, right? This guy, his tweets, his social media accounts, his actions, his interviews with the media, he clearly not just had a problem with the right, but with Donald Trump specifically. Again, this gets back to the inconvenient reality that our media faces. They know that they are complicit in allowing this language to happen. They don't want to call out Kamala Harris or most of the folks on the left, whether it's Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from Los Angeles, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader. They don't want to highlight it. They don't want to call it out. But here's the funny thing. It goes beyond that. You had Lester Holt, the evening anchor for NBC News, sort of saying, well, Trump's own rhetoric brings this down. And that's the other thing that you're seeing over and over again now on the left. Well, Trump kind of asked for it, right? I mean, he uses this language. He's incendiary. He's pugnacious. And therefore, he kind of deserves it, is what they're getting at, which is absolutely and 100% ridiculous. The idea that no matter how outrageous and repugnant you might find Donald Trump, that violence is ever a solution that you find acceptable or can explain is so wrong. And it's amazing that these guys try to excuse it in some way. So it's one unbelievable continuum from the media here today. It's either here's why it's okay, or hey, we're going to kind of try to mix it up so it can't blame the left.
What do you think this is going to do to the election campaign? It was incredible. The bullet that clipped Trump's ear had a sort of effect, I think, for about 2 weeks and then, boom, disappeared. Now this is back in the political news, or not if you have a look at USA Today, of course. It barely rates mention on the front page. But will this have an effect on the election?
I don't think so. I mean, think about how sad that is, though. You have the second assassination attempt on the leading candidate for president in 2 months. And I will bet you dollars to donuts, as we like to say, or used to say. I don't know that it's relevant anymore with the cost of donuts in the Biden economy, that it's not even going to make the top 5 stories on the morning news tomorrow. It's sad. I thought about this, Andrew, today, but because we talk about this in terms of the political realities of this, which is important. When you're 50 days out of an election, it's obviously extremely important. Normally, this would be huge, right? The first one was big, and that got washed away. I think because the shots didn't get fired, the media is going to downplay this even more. But I thought about this from a personal standpoint. I was with President Trump a week ago. I asked him how the ear was, and he showed me it looked great. I can't personally fathom what it would be like to have one assassination attempt. But to know it happened again, and that, you've got the Iranians and others out there plotting to do it even more, I can't imagine what that does to your mental health. And yet he gets up every day, and it almost makes him stronger and more resilient and strengthens his resolve. I got to tell you, I just can't imagine the personal mental fortitude that it takes to do what he's doing. I don't know that I could even come close to handling that. The idea of not having it happen once, but twice in that short of a period, it's just got to play a mental toll that I can't fathom right now.
I would have hoped, Sean, I noticed it didn't occur to you because it probably won't happen, that the media will now tone down its rhetoric on Donald Trump being a threat to democracy everywhere. But we shall see. Sean Spicer, always good to talk to you.
Pleasure, Andrew.